Survivor School is a safe space for all women, a place to heal, grow, and be supported. And in order to do so, we know that representation matters. So today, we are centering the voices of 6 incredible Black women: Malaika Simmons, Alexis Taveras, Sonia Pemberton, Lynn Meyers, Michelle Jackson, and Sherry Taveras. Now, they're here to share their experiences, their personal stories, their insights on how trauma affects Black women and girls, because real conversations create real change. We know that healing happens in community through sharing our experiences and by knowing that we are seen, heard, acknowledged, and valued. This is that conversation. And here is what these women had to say.
There is a light in her that just makes things just seem like we can do this. And as we started to have more conversations about the experts in Survivor School and the breadth of expertise that they had, it just became clear that this was definitely a talk that we needed to have. So I excitedly said yes. I wanted to be there. My name is Malaika, as in I like a Malaika, and I am the Chief Empathy Officer at Momentology Media. Momentology is an intentional framework that I developed. It is the study and practice, with an emphasis on practice, on how you operate in the now with what you have right now in this moment and leverage it for your best and highest use. I truly believe that we are all world changers. So if anybody meets me on these LinkedIn streets, I will probably greet you as, hey, world changer, because I believe we all are and have the capacity for it. I specifically hold a fuzzy, warm space in my heart for women. So most of the work that I do has something to do with women's empowerment. I don't have on my shirt today. Usually I have my All Decisions t-shirt, my Ruth Bader Ginsburg shirt, because I believe that everything, we have such intersectionality as women. Everything touches us and we touch everything. And so all the work that I do through workshops, through speaking, through corporate training has to do with empowering women and letting them own their own selves, right, and have agency. So again, so pleased to be here in this room with all of you, fantastic, wonderful experts in your own right. And lastly, I'll say I am a doctoral student in international psychology. So my research focuses on overwhelm and stress, specifically for women. And so everything that I work on or I do is around reducing said overwhelm and stress in women. So again, pleasure to see all of you on this evening and looking forward to the discussion.
Yay, awesome. Thank you so much, Malaika. And the overwhelm and stress, we need the tips, we need everything, because I think we could all use it. But very grateful to be here with you all today and moderating today. I guess I'll introduce myself as well. I'm Lexi. I'm a holistic women's online nutrition and training coach. And I started that because of my own pain and with relationship with food and emotional eating, and really developing that into creating a healthy relationship with my body, connecting to my womb again, my vessel, and creating a strong relationship, not a disconnected relationship. And same as Malaika, I have a warm, fuzzy place in my heart for a woman. So I work only with women. Actually, I know I said mainly only. And I'm excited to be here with you all today and learn from you guys and pick your brains as well and create like a really awesome discussion. So whoever wants to come off mute next and introduce yourselves, just go for it. And we'll kind of go around the room from there.
I guess I'll go next. I'll follow.
Okay, awesome.
Lexi. My name is Sherry Taveras, and I have worn many hats in my life, but the biggest one that I always will, my biggest joy is being a mother of 4 amazing children, and just happens to be Lexi is in this current stage of my life. I am a recent empty nester, and I have created a platform to inspire women to tell their stories through expressive writing. And I have a community of women of almost 900 women called Motive. It was started just from my own search of dealing with past trauma in my life and wanting to give women a platform to be able to express and tell their stories from there. I also facilitate writing workshops. I really enjoy it. I also write, and I have a book in progress that should be published this year. I'm excited about being a part of this conversation.
Love it. Thank you so much. And yes, writing, that is something that is just a beautiful way to express the things that we can't really feel or are tangible for us. So excited, and more of your workshops to come. Sandra, do you want to go next?
Yeah, it's Sonia. I'm Sonia Pemberton. That's okay. I'm Sonia Pemberton, and I hail from the beautiful city of Charleston, South Carolina, where we're actually having winter today. Temperatures in the 40s, so we're cold. But I work in corporate more so than anywhere else. I don't work specifically with women, but I do work with women in the groups of leaders where I help them to navigate change and uncertainty, which is an area that I am very passionate about, because that is, in essence, and I'm sure we'll probably get into it later, that's where we all live in the state of uncertainty. Everything we know is from our past. Everything that we're afraid of is in our future. And so we get stuck in that place. And once we get comfortable with the fact that we've always lived in the unknown, it's just a shift in how the perspective. And so once you're able to deal with that thought process, things move in a whole nother energy level, and with a different perspective and a different lens through which we see the world. So that's me.
I love it. I love it. And I totally agree with that. Can't wait to hear more of what you have to say. All right. Who wants to go next?
So I was looking at the chat, and so that threw me off. Anyway, I'm Lynn, and I just want to say I am extremely sick, so the energy is not there. But the reason why I knew I had to be here is because of this topic. When Malaika, I think this was her and RC, when they came to discuss or to come up with this decision to have this, I was like, I got to be a part of it. So I will be back and forth, but I am here. What I do, I have definitely worked with women the majority of my life. I just now have been introduced working with men because they see me as a safe space. So my background is in physical and sexual abuse because I came from both. And I've been working with women for over to like 24 years, like in this space, just to help them feel safe and sexy in their bodies, because those are the two things that, you lose when you've been violated. So I do that with like the work that I do with coaching and courses and workshops. And I too have written 4 books. So I do a lot of things, and I am very grateful that I am in the position where I can serve in that capacity. So I'm just great to be here, and I can't wait for the discussion.
Thank you, Lynn. And I hope you feel better.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I am Michelle Jackson. I am a mom, a Mimi, and for those of you who are not aware of what that is a grandmother of 3 beautiful, amazing boys. I am a mother-in-law. I have 1 beautiful daughter. I am a wife, married for the second and final time. We will celebrate 13 years in May. Won't be doing this again, but anyway. No, seriously though, I'm also a certified coach with 2 different certifications. I am a life and transformational healing coach, and I help women find their voices so that they can heal their own trauma. I think, I believe in therapy. I love therapists. I am not a therapist. I think there's such power in that role. And also, you only start the process when you are ready. I don't care how many therapists, how many pastors, how many people are pouring into you. It is when you find your voice and your value that you can actually start to create the resources, and then pick up the resources, finding your voice and starting to implement and execute your own healing. So I help women heal. I am also a self-published author. I've written 2 poetry books. I actually started writing a piece about last night, which is so funny. But I am a poet, a spoken word artist. I am a newfound candle maker. I am changing because I'm also proving that it is never too late to reinvent yourself and to pivot. So I'm changing some things, shifting some things, focusing more on aromatherapy and the power of aromatherapy and how we overlook that in all of the therapy modalities, I think, from the holistic perspective. So I am excited. When I was asked to be here by RC, I said, what time, when, where? Just let me know where. This is such an imperative conversation for so many reasons. And I hope each and every one of you, all of the viewers, all of the participants, I hope we all walk away fuller, wiser, and more empathetic to each other. Thank you all for having me here.
Yes. Thank you, Michelle. I love how you help women find their voice because you have the voice, like you just have that. So it's so great to connect with you all. And that is all for our panelists. Awesome. So I want to open the floor with the first question to kind of start off today's discussion. And we can go in order of who introduced themselves. If anybody's really burning to jump in, you can just go ahead and use the raise your hand feature under the react, the little heart at the bottom. If you press the upper arrow, you can click raise your hand. If it's not available to you, you can just drop in the chat that you want to go. But the first question for today is really diving into why. Like why, we know why this topic is important, but I want to dive into why uncovering this topic is important to you specifically in your experience and your own perspective. So we'll go ahead and start with Sherry, and move around from there. Why is this topic for you specifically important?
I thought Malaika was going to go first. That's okay. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. When RC brought this up to a lot of us are, we're honored to be a part of her community for the Survivor School and speaking on trauma. And a part of me wasn't quite sure how to talk about it in this kind of setting. And I felt it was important for me here to not just share, but to learn as well, because I don't think, as I'll speak personally for me, as an African-American woman, I've never had these conversations with other African-American women. And I think that says a lot, that we, I know there's a lot of shame and guilt and a lot of the things that happened for me growing up. But I was speaking to Malaika earlier today, and I had asked her, about what I wanted to talk about. And my trauma was in the form of more of a peer trauma in the Black community as a fair-skinned Black person. And just the trauma that I experienced because I was fair-skinned. I never knew that I was different until it was brought to my attention from my peers. And my nickname was Yellow Ass. And I was raised in a military home, my dad was in the Air Force, and in our home we had people of all races in our home. And it was very secluded. We lived on Air Force base, and so there were different people of different races in our home. My parents never sat down and said, you're this, they're that. It was just people. And when we retired from the base, when my dad retired and I went to a public school, it was primarily people of color, African American, Latino, and it was the first time that I was sort of put on display, and I was given this nickname, Yellow Ass. And it was interesting to me because the white kids would say, well, you're not really because of your skin color. And then the black kids would say, well, you're not really black. And that's where the confusion started happening for me. And as I grew up, I felt always very insecure about who I was. I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to, it was the first time I think it was to struggle with identity, as far as who I was as a young girl. And I think I realized as I got older, the division within our community, the skin color, the darker, the lighter, and how it created a lot of division. And that other girls, the darker girls, the lighter girls, were all experiencing these kinds of trauma, and that we were doing it to each other. So I didn't really know how to bring that up, but that was important to me. I think it's an important conversation. I think it's a conversation that we've had for years, but I'm not really sure that I know for me, I've never where I've been able to actually have that conversation. So.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing. And I'm really grateful that we were able to create the space now to have that conversation. But to me and Malaika were talking earlier of really doing it from a place of healing and resolution and coming together, and that divide that maybe was created from a place of pain and trauma and all of the things. And now we get to mesh that and move forward with that. And that's the beauty of having these conversations. And I'm so grateful you brought that up too, because I know there's things that we just want to it's not as, that's not really important, or, that kind of thing. But that's why we're here today. So Michelle, raise your hand next, and then Malaika, and then we'll move forward.
Thank you, Alexis. So I am here, and first, before I dive in, I want to acknowledge Sherry and her share. Colorism is a real thing, as we know. And unfortunately, or fortunate, I don't know which word here, but unfortunately, Black people, specifically in America, we didn't create that. We learned that. That was forced upon us, right? To hate our own skin. I want to read something really short. It's a quote from Malcolm X. The most disrespected person in America is the Black woman. The most unprotected person in America is the Black woman. The most neglected person in America is who? The Black woman. And that's why I'm here. I am so thankful for RC for this platform and this conversation, because so often Black women just forge ahead. We just keep going, right? We don't take a moment to breathe. We don't take a moment for self-care, because in our roots in America, in our foundation, it is work, work, and more work. And you don't focus on your internal self. You're just trying to overcome. Even if you were born into privilege, you still show up in the world, and there are labels that people assign to you. I am here because this is not going to be an easy conversation. I don't want it to be easy. We don't grow in ease. We just don't. We grow in resistance. We expand in resistance if we show up and we keep going and we listen. So I'm excited to have a platform of Black women expressing not only their perspectives and their experiences, but also the wisdoms that they've acquired along the way, so that we can all grow. So the concept of the truth of the Black woman in America being the most disrespected, I want that to be challenged tonight. I want some individuals who came into this panel discussion thinking about us one way. I want them to challenge their thoughts and open their perspectives to say, wow, I never looked at it that way. As Sherry talked about the colorism, that the pendulum swings both ways, from fair skin to dark skin to brown skin. I'm a brown skin girl. My mother was a fair skin woman who always wanted to be a brown skin girl. Go figure. I still, because I'm brown, I didn't have the experiences that the darker skin women and girls had. I just kind of was gliding through because I wasn't quite dark, but also not quite light. And so skin tone was never an issue for me, but I saw it on both sides. So I want these topics, these misnomers, these stereotypes. I want to dispel the stereotype that the Black woman is the helper. Not here to be your helper. Yes, I'm a Christian also. Okay, I'm a Christian, so automatically, by nature of my faith, I want to help. I want to sow. I want to make sure that I leave places better than I found them. However, I don't want that to be the expectation when I walk in the room. It should be my choice to help or to not help. It should be my choice to speak or to not speak. And when I speak, I should be heard. So there are various stereotypes that I'm here to dispel tonight. The first one being, I am not your helper. I'm not a servant.
I love it. Thank you so much, Michelle. Ooh, I'm getting goosebumps already. I'm like, we're just on the first question. So
it's just the first question. I'm telling you, the pre-call, like, this is not the level. The next level is the level, right? We already knew what we were coming into. Yes, thank you for that, Sherry and Michelle as well. I'm here because I am a seer, right? I have always had the ability. So I'm an empath, which is why I'm the chief empathy officer at my company, right? I'm an empath. I didn't really know what that meant as a young person, as a young girl. I just knew I always felt everybody's everything really, really deeply and didn't know where to put it. So I was walking around with all of these emotions and energies that were not mine, right? And didn't know how to dispel them. And that caused trauma. It caused trauma for me to be so invested in everyone else at all times. And not knowing that the trauma there. And I said to someone earlier, I think Sherry and I were talking, I said, being born is traumatic. Okay. We come into this planet through trauma. It starts off rough and I don't know, it goes downhill from there sometimes. But there's just so much that we have to endure as humans. And so what I said earlier is about the intersectionality. I'm here to look at all the facets of our humanity as Black women, because we do hold multiple identities at one time and we're always juggling. There's in a time when you are not one of the things. Okay. And then you just keep adding things because Michelle says she's stopping at the second marriage, but I'm just saying you get married, right? You get married and then you're a mom and a wife, and you're a mother, a wife, and a daughter, and you're a sister and auntie. So you just keep on adding. You just keep, and then God forbid you actually have some sort of career aspiration. Then you're a student, a PhD student, you're a CEO, so we just keep adding. The slashes go on and on and on, but we don't necessarily unpack the trauma that each one of those slashes may do to our lives. And so I just want to encourage everyone that's on the call today, and if you listen back to it, to just hold space for each one of those slashes, because you're not one thing all the time, nor do you have to pick all the time, right? And so my one of my logos for my company is a prism, because I believe that it's not changing who you are, it's just a different reflection. And so a lot of times, especially in the corporate space, we have this imposter syndrome. That's a whole other thing. whole other masterclass. We'll get to time. Several of us have some very opinionated opinions about imposter syndrome. But anyway, the imposter syndrome that occurs is because we think we're changing. We think we're code switching. And how bad is that? Is it a protective mechanism or isn't it? Right. And so thinking about another trauma, the trauma to be accepted, to always feel like you have to prove yourself, creates this need for you to quote unquote code switch. I will tell you that it has not always been that way, but it is the way that the person you see now is the same person that did the TED Talk. This is the same person that you'll see in a congressional briefing. This is the same person you'll see on the Hill. This is the same person you'll see at the PTA meeting. And I'm okay with that. But it takes a while for you to get okay with all of the reflections of yourself. And so that's why I'm here this evening, because I want to hopefully instill that into other Black women. And then if you're not a Black woman, and thank you so much, put in some comments as to why he's here. If you're not a Black woman, to hold space for Black women as they go through their prison. Whatever she's reflecting today, that's what she's reflecting today. That unquestionably, right? And so we have to, one, be ourselves and be okay with it during our reflection. But then we also have to, as outsiders, not police Black women and their thoughts, their feelings, their actions, how they show up, what they say out of their mouth. And that's what happens a lot of times. And so my main thing is, and the reason that I'm here is that I hope that I can help to maybe shine light on all the different reflections and how each of them can have trauma. And there's none worse than the other. We'll get into that too, I'm sure later on. There's no other trauma. You can't say that, you know, being an abused child is more traumatic than surviving sexual violence. You can't say that one is, they're just different. They're just different and they all affect us. And so being able to sit with who you are in each of those identities is really, really important.
Thank you so much for that, Malaika. Yeah, I was getting goosebumps because I think it's so true. The finding safety in certain identities even, and feeling like, you know, you have to be just one thing at all times and step into this, but we're actually so multidimensional. And you can't really put us into a box, anybody, right? All right, let's move on to Sonia. Okay.
Thank you, Lexi. Of course, thank you to RC for inviting me to be a part of this esteemed panel and have the opportunity to speak with the women that are also on the panel, and also to the people that have come to participate. My trauma started as an 8-year-old child, and it wasn't a physical trauma. It was learning at the age of 8 that there was something called an illegitimate bastard. Having grown up, born in the 50s, so I'll be 67 next week, I've been around a minute. And understanding at 8 years old this term, illegitimate bastard, and realizing that they were talking about me. Because my parents were unmarried teens, and I was raised by my grandmother. And in that era, society had decided that children who were born of unmarried couples was illegitimate. How can you say that a child is illegitimate? I was not responsible for the consequences of my birth, but I lived under the labeling that society had placed on children who were born to parents who were not married. So I learned this term at the age of 8. We had, for those of you that are younger, we had something called a Webster dictionary that came before Google. And so we had to go look in the Webster dictionary to figure out what illegitimate bastard meant. And at 8 years old, I was an advanced child. I went into school reading early. I went to kindergarten reading. I spent a lot of time alone. I was also an only child raised by my paternal grandmother. So I went and got the big Webster when I kept hearing these words. I couldn't spell it illegitimate yet. So I had to sound it out. They taught us then, I'm not sure what they're teaching now, but they taught us then how to use the alphabet and sound out words. So I found illegitimate. And then I also found bastard and understood that that really was describing me. So going through life, knowing that society has labeled you as less than, as an 8-year-old child. I want you to just sit with that for a minute. How do you process that at 8? And then let's add on, I didn't live in a traditional family. I was raised by my paternal grandmother. Another stigma, no mommy, no daddy at the household. They existed, but they did not exist in the household that I lived in. So going through school and growing up with that label, I didn't really understand it as trauma. I didn't understand it was trauma until I was much older, when I had to process what I was feeling about how others might perceive me based on that label. And as I got older, maybe in high school, I was a little more aware of my identity and becoming who I was becoming, who I wanted to be. It also, it was traumatic, but it also at the same time was the motivation, the impetus for me to excel, because I will prove them wrong. I am not illegitimate. They may think I'm illegitimate. I am as equal to another human being, and I don't care if they're white, purple, or green, or orange. Not because of my color of my skin, not because of my gender, but because I am as worthy as the next person. That was the mentality that I came to understand as a teenager. That is the mentality that I have held for almost 67 years. And I have 2 daughters. One is 42, the other one will be 36 this week, that I raised to understand that even because they are women and we are less than in this society, I don't care what race we are, we just happen to be, have a whole lot of other things on us. The helper, as Michelle has said, the strong Black woman, we can endure more pain than anyone else. The last ones to get some pain meds when we ask for them in a hospital or for physicians. There's a whole thing we can go into, and I won't go into all of it. But just giving you a little tip of how our day goes and how our life is experienced in many different ways. Healthcare, just society in general, and we won't even get into the workplace yet. So for me, raising 2 daughters, it was very important that they understood very early on. Well, first of all, they didn't come in as illegitimate bastards, so they didn't have to worry about that part. But they still came in as Black women. And so we had to, for me, it was really important and very important for this work that we are able as women to raise women to have the high self-esteem that they deserve, and to understand who they are and the power that we hold as women, and especially as Black women, because we have been through it. Okay. We have been through it. Let's even go back 400 and some years. We have been through it. And we have yet survived all of it. Now, many of us are still holding some of that trauma. I have let go of illegitimate bastard because that is not who I am. But that was the beginning of the trauma. And I want you to recognize that those labels, my TED Talk was on othering, dispelling the myth of the other. And I talked a little about that and all the labeling that we give. And I want to say also that I have noticed in the work that I've done with corporate women, Malaika mentioned that imposter syndrome. I'm not going to go down that road right now. But the work that I've done with women in corporate, it's very important to understand how we talk to ourselves. We are what we think, not what we think we are. Sit with that for a minute. We are what we think, not what we think we are. So you may say you are all this and 50 bags of chips, you're confident, you're da-da-da, but if you are thinking to yourself anything other than that, that's what you are. That's your belief system. So I had to raise my girls, because I had been through the illegitimate bastard syndrome. I just made that up. It's not a syndrome. But I had been through that life experience, and I wanted my girls to know that they were perfect in every way. There was nothing that they couldn't do or achieve, that I had their back no matter what, and they were not to allow anyone to define them. They define themselves, and only they, because we are what? We are what we think, not what we think we are. And I'll leave it at that. I could go on and on. I have almost 70 years to talk to y'all about.
I love that so much. What we think, not what we think we are. And I think this is a perfect segue. I think what everybody said really just set the tone for the rest of the conversation. You mentioned, Sonia, like not identifying with what someone else labels you as or what society labels you as, which brings me into our next question that I want to kind of bring up into the topic of what our experience is with who society says Black women are, and how, but also how you've taken that identity on, how you've rejected or even redefined what that means to you. So one of the main things is like anger, right? Like whether it's the strong Black woman who can endure everything, or the angry Black woman, or we raise our voice just a little bit and it's, oh, spooky, right? So we know that anger does not belong to Black women, right? So I want to ask your guys' experience. And for those who also want to engage in the chat, like feel free to ask questions in the chat. But we'll go in order, Michelle, Malaika, and then we'll go around. What is your experience with who society says Black women are, and how have you in subconscious ways maybe taken on that identity at first, but then reworked to redefine that in your experience? And I believe Michelle was first and then Malaika.
Well, I love that question.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Before you go, I just wanted to, because I see our it was like the Hollywood squares. We're like moving around. So Lynn did not go on the first question. I'm just in terms of why she's. Yeah. And then and then Michelle went before me. Yeah.
Well, I didn't go. I was going to go on this one. Thank you, Malaika. I appreciate you. I was going to speak on this one.
Okay, awesome. So Lynn, we'll make sure that you get a chance on this question.
Alexis, Lynn can go now. Lynn, you want to speak on this one first? You can go first and then I'll follow you.
I do. Thank you. Okay, so when I hear you ask this question, and I do not apologize about me being comfortable, because again, I'm trying to get my body to where it feels the most comfortable. So I'm going to put my hand right here. When I hear you ask this question, I think about the angry child. The angry Black woman, yes, we talked about that. But then I think about how I was a more angry child versus an angry woman. I was an angry child because I didn't understand that I was, what's the word? I was misunderstood. That's the word I'm looking for. I was misunderstood, and I did not think people understood what I had gone through, what I was going through. Like, do you see me? Do you see me over here pretending like I'm a great pretender? Like, recovering pretender, because I don't pretend anymore. Like, I grew up pretending. Like, that's why I was so great in choir, glee club, like all the things, right? Like, I was a star. And I was like, you don't see me, like I'm suffering over here. But I put on a happy face. And people didn't see that. So I was angry inside, extremely angry inside. And I think I stopped being angry probably like early 20s, because I saw I was destroying myself. So now that's how I would answer that first part. I want to go like into what Sherry had said before, and then what Michelle had said. When I show up in the world now, like I am the friend, the sister, the Black woman, the confidant, when we see a lot of things on social media and they say, oh my God, don't y'all just love when Black women call you baby? Like, I am that person because I create my space. And I understand, like what Sherry said, I didn't have those spaces. So I get that. That's why I create those spaces. I started creating those spaces when I was in my 20s because I didn't see it either. And I was like, you know what? If it's not there, then I'm going to be the one that's going to create those. And Sherry, shout out to you. If you have not found that space, I got you because I already created a community for that. Okay. You would not be out there by yourself. Okay. Just so you know. This is a safe space. This is a brave space where we are right now. That's why I say everybody breathe. I don't want anyone to feel like uptight or whatever. Like, these are your experiences. These are your stories. These are your testimonies, and people are here to learn. We are here to learn from each other. So no, the angry Black woman doesn't show up in my life anymore. However, I do still see it, and I still understand it, simply because maybe there was no access to the space that I provide or that I have created. Or maybe it's just like I don't trust, or I don't want you, like all the things that I had before in my life. I will only speak on myself. I didn't trust. I didn't think people would love me, like all those things. And if that's what people are thinking, then you don't think that space is out there. So you will encounter people. I will say this, and then I'll yield my mic. There was a story, that I like to share with a lot of people. I'll make it shorter than what it really is. So one day I was in a store, and I won't say the store's name, but I was in a store, and a lady and we came to the counter at the same time. I had about 3 items. I think she had about 6. And so she dropped 2 of the items, I think 1 or 2 of the items, and I picked them up with my free hand. She said, "Don't do that." And I was like, no problem. She's like, "Oh my God." And I said, "You're not a bother. You're not a problem. So here are your items." So she took them back. I think step like 4 more steps. She says, "I keep dropping them." I pick them up again. This time I said, "I'm going to put your items on a counter. As a matter of fact, you go before me because I don't want you to drop them again." She says, "Oh my God." And I said, don't say anything. Just wait for her. She says, "I have to learn when I come into the store. I have to learn to get a cart." And without me thinking, I said, "No, you don't. You have to learn to take support." The entire store was like, "Ooh." And I was just like, "Did I just say that?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, I said that." She and I then began to converse, and I said, "I saw you feeling like you could not ask for help. I saw you feeling like nervous about help. But then I also saw you allow me to help you." And I said, "And that's why I continued." I said, "This is the thing. You will encounter women like me. You will encounter other people that only want to help you, only want to support you, and want nothing from you." And so she was like, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, you've encountered that person today." And so she paid for herself. She turned around, she looked at me, she says, "Thank you. That was a blessing." So why do I share that? It's because we don't have to continue to wear labels that are placed on us. Sometimes we do it to ourselves as well, especially if we start to begin to think that's who we are. But we can be soft, we can be nurturing, we can be those things. We can be angry too, like all those things if we choose to be. But we don't have to buy in what society thinks we are. Okay, so that's the reason why I say that, and I'm glad the question came up, and I yield my mic.
Yes, thank you so much, Lynn, and thank you for sharing that story. I definitely, now that you brought up the nurturing and redefining that identity, I do want to go into the topic of Black femininity today, and how you've kind of redefined that for yourself, especially with the identities and what we've been told in society. So I want to go to Michelle now and go into, again, how have you redefined what society says Black women are for yourself?
I agree with everything Lynn said, and I'm so happy she's here, even though she's not feeling well. So I'll share a quick story. I have so many to choose from, which is really unfortunate. Okay. A quick story. I worked for this company, and I worked very closely with the president. I managed the executive office, and there was a woman who was VP level, and everyone knew she was known for lacking integrity. Now, this was her reputation. One day, she entered the president's office, and we had connecting offices, so I could hear everything that went on unless he closed his door. And she's referring to me and lying, blatantly lying. So I stood up And I walked over to his office, to his door, and she could see me from the opposite end. And I just stood there and listened to her finish her lie. And I said, wait a minute, did that happen? And I challenged her lie. She turned all sorts of red, all shades of red. And, well, and she started stumbling. I said, actually, that didn't happen. And I spoke with the president and told him exactly what did happen. Later, in my performance review, she didn't apologize. She just kind of left the office and didn't say anything. Later in my performance review, which was like a couple of months later, I'm sitting across the table from the president. And I mean, my review was amazing, except this one thing. He said, and he and I had a really good relationship. He said, you are amazing. Everyone respects you here, yada, yada, yada. But there's this one time I saw you were so angry. I knew immediately the situation he was referring to. And I said, how was I angry? What did I do? And he replayed everything and talked about it. And I said, so did I raise my voice? He said, no. I said, did I use profanity? No. Did I enter her space in an aggressive way? I was literally across the room from her. No, you didn't. I said, did I disrespect her? No. I said, so how was I angry? He looked with this befuddled look as if like, why are you challenging me on this? I, a white man, said you were angry. You're a black woman, so you were angry. I said, here's the issue. I wasn't angry. I challenged her lie. And I took the power back by forcing him to own the real truth. How did I do that? I said, I have witnessed white women enter your office and have full-blown meltdowns. I have been in board meetings and watched white women and white men disrespect you, yell at you, it was a really wild office at times, but I said, and you've never called anyone angry. You don't even acknowledge that they've done it. I said, I have watched you send a white woman home for the rest of the day so that she could calm down and rest and have a mental health afternoon. Yet, because I stand up for myself and I advocate for myself, you call me angry. I said, I've never looked at you as racist. I said, however, there is bias here. I am not angry. I merely was my own advocate because you were not. He apologized profusely for days, for weeks. He even brought it up like months later. That's just one of several situations I've been in. I want to read something, and this is part of the poem that I started writing last night. The question is, the misnomers, the stereotypes and all the things, how people look at us and how we've taken back the power. I see writing and speech as powerful tools, so I use both. I am not your angry black trope. Hips, thighs, lips, look at my eyes, see me. I'm not your parody. A caricature of humanity, or your soul sister hanging in the streets. I can enunciate, and I don't need you to say how articulate my speech is. I'm not his or yours. I don't belong to you. I'm not your mammy. I'm a king's kid, which makes me royalty. Can you see me yet? I'm beyond your limiting beliefs of my 3/5 existence. Only 3/5 of me submits to resisting the desire to shut down. I won't, because my crown requires that I fly. I take up space. And so in this place, I compel you to see me. That's just a part of it. In that one little portion of the poem, I talk about, as Black women, often, unfortunately, I've been in a situation, in a space that should have been safe, where someone was parodying me. I wasn't in the room with her, and she was in the room surrounded by white women, imitating me, talking in this soul sister girl catching the air kind of way. And then she parodied me in my face, surrounded by white women. I am here because when a Black woman or a Black person tells you something is racist, it's biased, it is prejudiced, it is. You don't have to be able to understand. But if I say it, I'm a well-balanced being. I get along with people. If I say it, it's already required courage for me to say it because I know the country I'm in. I know that if I say something is racist or racially biased or there's systemic racism, I already know that I'm going to be accused of pulling the race card. The race card doesn't exist. This country was created on the backs of Black people, on the backs of slaves. Racism is real, and it's still real because it's systemic. And it's the way that people view you. It's the bias. It's the stereotypes. It's the parroting. It's the soul sister. I come into a room and I'm your helper. I talked about that before. I'm not mammy. I'm not nursing your babies. I'm not here to be support. Sometimes I am a supporting role. Of course, everyone is. But sometimes I have main character action. I have main character posture. And if you don't see me as anything more than support, there will always be conflict and there will always be systemic bias. How have I taken my power back? Through my voice, through owning the spaces that I walk into. I say that I am not a thermometer, I'm a thermostat. I change atmospheres, which is why I can come into this panel reading poetry that I've written, because I am not limited to someone else's view of me. I'm only limited by my own thoughts. As as Sonia said, I believe in that. I subscribe to that. I create my reality. And yes, it is more difficult being a Black woman in America than it is for anyone else. That is a truth. I said this in our meeting, our Zoom meeting before this one. Being born Black and a girl is traumatic. Not to mention all the other traumas and all the other systemic racisms that go along with it. And the fact that when we talk about babies born to Black women and how Black women are more likely to die in childbirth than any other race of women. And so is their babies. Why is that? I mean, not to mention education and the school system, and we see what's going on in the government now. We see how they want to erase Black women. They want to erase Black people. The president, and I have to say this, the president, when he was running, the current president, in his campaign, he said that whole Make America Great Again slogan, he said literally out of his mouth, I want to take it back 300 years. First of all, America's never been great for Black people. But if you want to go back 300 years, we were still in chains and shackles. So yes, as a Black person, we already come into the earth with trauma. As a Black girl, a Black woman, there's additional trauma. Not to mention the fact that most of us, if not all, have also experienced sexual trauma. I'm a childhood sexual abuse survivor, thriver, overcomer, in addition to so many other traumas. That's all.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was very powerful. I think we can all feel the silence of that power. So thank you so much for sharing that. Malaika.
I love Michelle bringing the poetry all up in here, because that's my thing, girl. Just got me thinking like, let me go to my Google Drive and break out the poems. No, that was beautiful. It was beautiful and poignant, and it just, the thing that I think of is that so one, we touched on it. Sonia talked about a little bit. We touched on, this is about trauma as it relates to Black women and girls. right? And the girls become women who beget girls who become women. And we had an interesting conversation earlier, Lexi and I, just about my daughter. My daughter's 15, and she is the epitome of the momentology method. So I explained to you all what momentology was in the beginning, and I promise you, from God's mouth to this planet is how my daughter got here. She is a reflection of the most divine in ways that I can't even, in this short period of time that we have here, discuss. But I think the importance of that is not only did she come here to the planet like that, she was encased in what Lexi and I were just talking about. I've decided to call it anti-trauma. It just kind of came out as we were talking. The opposite of trauma is the safety, is a safe place, right? And her brother, she has 5 brothers, y'all, so she's never getting married. She has 5 brothers and dad. My husband was in the Navy, and so you kind of think there's lots of eyeballs on her at all times. So she's growing up with lots of folks surrounding her, but she's growing up with so much love. And it's not that we can protect her from any and every trauma that might come in her lifetime. She is a Black child. She is a female Black child. We can't protect her from every single thing, but we can equip her with the ability to withstand so much more. And I think that that's one of the imperatives of anti-trauma, right? So some of us that are on this call, those of us who are either psychologists or work in trauma-informed practices, we understand that there are ways to deal with trauma that don't re-traumatize the person. Sometimes, as human beings, we just fall in it and we just flap around, just wade in it because we don't know what else to do. It hurts and I want to scream. And so you scream. And to Lynn's point, what if you're screaming and nobody hears you? When you scream and nobody responds, nobody hears you, what then do you do with that trauma? And so what has happened over time and what continues to happen in generation after generation is we learn how to package our trauma neatly and quietly so that it does not disturb other people. That happens in the nuclear Black family because you can't talk about it, right? Because to talk about it means to admit something, and admitting a trauma to you means accepting that I allowed the trauma. I'm speaking from a familiar space, right? So anyone who's been around people who have overcome some level of trauma, there was a secrecy. There always is, even when it's not a secret, and that. There's a cognitive dissonance, right? There's something that doesn't fit when you were there. I saw you there. I saw you see me, see and witness this thing. But yet in conversation after conversation, y'all know the gaslighting. It didn't happen. What are you talking about? What do you mean? Oh, it wasn't that bad. You're overreacting. So then you get pushback and this is in every trauma space. I don't care if it's corporate, from your boss gaslighting you. I don't care if it's your parents saying, no, I don't have a favorite child. I don't care if it's a domestic violence partner like, oh, you made me do it. It doesn't matter who the perpetrator of the trauma, who the inflictor of the pain is. There's a supposition that is all in your head. And when we believe that it's all in our head, we then don't seek to do anything about it. Oh, it's just me. And so I love how Lynn has reiterated that this is a safe space. And this is a safe space because we're not going to tell you what your trauma is or was. We're not even going to tell you what to do about it, right? There's therapy, and for those who haven't tried it, maybe you should, but that's not what this is. What this is an acknowledgement, because the negation of trauma is almost as bad as the trauma itself. You could get past the trauma You're like, it happened. Okay, I got life to live. I'm going to do things. But someone constantly telling you that it didn't happen, that you're making it up, that you're overreacting, creates additional trauma. So when we're talking about the birth rate for African American women, we're talking about, maybe not getting married, right? Having multiple kids. Promiscuity comes from a place, lots of times, not every time, lots of times, is born of trauma. There's been some trauma that has taken away your value, your sense of self-worth. So then if there's nothing special about me, I'm just going to be out there. Everybody can have some. Why not? There's nothing special about me. That rolls over into every facet of our lives. If you don't care about yourself, if you don't have a oneness and understand your connection to source, that no matter what has happened to your physical being, no trauma, no pain, no infliction actually reaches to source. And until you understand that, you're going from one trauma and one bad behavior to the next. And then what happens? You're re-traumatized, or you're differently traumatized because you started from here with one trauma and it started to add on. And so, yes, it's hard work to peel back the traumas. It's easier to just pretend it doesn't happen. It's easier to be your own gaslighter. I mean, I don't know how many of you have gaslit your own self. Oh, you're just overacting. It's not that bad. You start telling yourself, you talk yourself out of what you already know is the truth. And so whenever we show up in spaces, and what I've said earlier about me being the same person, is because it's not so much that I'm the same person, it's that God's light it's always there. And the only difference is how much of it I let you see. That's it. I'm still the same person. I'm the exact same person. And also, one of the things I want to, identities and labels, and we talked about that a little bit, are important as well. So talking about how far back all of this trauma goes, right? And slavery and all that sort of thing. My daughter and I were at lunch with friends of hers. And my daughter is often the only brown child in a group. We live in a county that's primarily white, and it's just, that's her reality. My daughter is also a highly melanated natural hair child who, as one little boy said, don't touch Shiloh's hair, she'll break your arm. I second that wholeheartedly. Sorry. But we live in a space where she's surrounded by, she could take on the other, and she refuses to. So we're at lunch and we're having this discussion, and Shiloh said something about, her friend said something about slaves. And she's the little girl, they were like 13 maybe. And her friend said something about slaves. And Shiloh said, the enslaved, you mean? And so the little girl said, well, what's the difference? And she said, I'm a Black person. I'm not a slave. People were enslaved. That is something that happened to them. That's not who they were. She was 13, y'all. Now, I'm saying that that's her, or whether she picked it up, or Shiloh 101, probably the latter, right? But just understanding you are not the label. Things happen to you, and that's what trauma is. Something has happened, but that's not who you are. So as a Black person in 1847, you were enslaved. You were not a slave. When you experience trauma, the thing happened, but it's not who you are. It's a thing that happened to you. And so as we peel back and talk through all of these different things, that's the one thing that I continue to talk about and think about and teach others, is that separation, because it's the identity with the trauma that causes so much of the pain. Identifying as the trauma, that is not you. It's a thing that happened.
Wow. Oh, y'all are leaving me speechless. I'm like, oh, okay, like, damn. But I love it. I think the most powerful thing for me, and I would love to hear what resonated with you guys in the chat. For me, it was definitely like slaves versus the enslaved and the correlation to that and identity. And that we don't have to identify with the things that we've gone through, that we can extract and understand that like those things happen to us, but they don't have to define who we are. So thank you for that, Malaika and Shiloh. Sonia, I would love to hear for you, your experience with how, especially in corporate, I'm curious, how you've kind of navigated what society tells you a woman or girl is, especially growing up, and how you've redefined that. I know you talked about the illegitimate bastard and redefining that for yourself, but I'm curious, as you've kind of grown up, and especially in corporate, how you've kind of claimed who you are and rejected what society says you are. And then we'll move on to Mom.
Let's see. Like Malaika has said, once I was older, grown, married, probably from the time, maybe, let me think for a second, probably from the time I was in my mid-20s, almost 40 years ago, I've lived and existed in being one of few people of color in my world. Lived in predominantly white neighborhoods. My children went to predominantly white schools. When I was in corporate America, began working because of how I decided at probably somewhere around high school, 17, before I went off to college, that I, and only I, had the power to decide who I am, period. I, Sonia, decided what my identity was going to be. And I did not back from that. I walk into a room with all the power that I hold. I don't really care what other people's thought processes are, because that's their problem, not my problem.
Yes.
Ever. That's never the case for me. So when I walk into a room, I walk in with the full 100%, sometimes 150% if I feel I need it, to present, to speak, to lead, and to mentor the people that I've been entrusted to do that with. So I decide what my identity is. I decided what it was when I was in my 20s. It began to evolve as I experienced life more, as I became, as Malaika said, all those different identities: mother, wife. My husband and I will be married 45 years in May. Oof. Yeah, it's been a minute. Wow. Happily, I might add. And we've had 3 children. I do have a black son. That's a whole nother conversation. From a mother's perspective and all the things that happen to black men in America. But for me, I do not allow, I hear the chatter, and as far as I'm concerned, it's noise. I just don't allow other people to determine my identity and how I'm going to move in the world. And I move in the world that I have all the power I need to do the things that I need to do. And that's just how I exist. That's how I've always existed. That's how I taught my daughters to exist, my son as well. He has some other rules now that they just shoot us on sight. But other than that, we move in the world within our own power, with the power that we believe we have, because, as I said before, we are what we think, not what we think we are. And so for me, it's always been to be confident in my ability. And not that I walk in with an attitude and I'm all that and 50 bags of chips. I just walk in as though I belong in the room and I'm in the room, and that I can take control of what I need to take control of while I'm in the room. Because when I am in the room, I'm usually speaking or facilitating a group, and they're looking at me as the leader.
Right.
And that's just how I exist. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. You decide.
Yeah.
Who you are, and you walk that walk. Not pretending. I'm not code switching. I am that person that walks in any room, in every room, with the strength, with the attitude, with the power, with the know-how and the expertise to deliver what I'm being paid to deliver in corporate and socially, who I am, who I know I am, and who I confidently am. That is the same person, as Malaika has said. I am the same person everywhere I go. That's how I walk in. Now, I'm an introvert. So I'm usually either, yes, people find that very surprising. I'm either the observer, where I'm like the wallflower and I'm watching everything that's happening, or I'm the hostess and it's not my party. So when I walk into the room, I decide which person I'm going to be, whether it's calling me to observe, or it's calling me to be more active, and I have become the hostess and it's not my party. And I'm only being the hostess because it allows me the opportunity to find out what other people are thinking and how people are acting and interacting with others in the room. But normally I'm the hostess and it's not my party, but sometimes I'm also the observer. And as an introvert, that's the most comfortable place for me to be.
Ooh, thank you so much, Sonia. I feel like I was getting activated. I was like, I love that. I love that. For me,
you cannot be defined by other people. Do not, just don't do it. Just don't do it.
Yeah, and I feel like the fact that you said that you just own your power, and honestly, I think you are all that and 50 bags of chips or whatever the saying is. But I think for me, at least, I've felt my power, but would feel the brighter my light shine, the more other people's shadows lightened up and triggered. And so you feel that, and then you want to shrink, to keep everybody the balance and the peace and the neutrality. And if I don't take up too much space, then this person won't be insecure and that person won't feel some type of way. And then I can just be neutral, but then you suffocate and you feel this like lack of expression in your throat and you're just living, but you're not actually alive. So I feel like you saying that, as for me, a younger Black woman, being like taking up the space, owning my power unapologetically and not shrinking and being digestible for other people, is really activating. So thank you for that.
I want to leave a tip. Acknowledge what you're feeling, right? First, you're feeling that whenever you're having that discomfort or uncomfortable situation. You can acknowledge that, but I suggest that you have what we call an if-then, right? Implementation intention is sometimes called. When ahead of time, if you know whatever it is that triggers you, and you're going into a situation where you could be, and I like the word activated opposed to triggers for some people. Whenever you're activated or you're going into a situation where you're activated, do something ahead of time. Know if X happens, then I'm going to do Y. So that immediately it becomes a switch in your mind that when that situation occurs, when you start to feel like that you're taking up too much space in the room, or someone's making you feel like you're taking up too much space in the room, you already know to trick that's going to activate another action for you. And you decide ahead of time what that is so that you already know what you're going to do when you feel that way. If X happens, I will do Y. And you can have a list of those things for every different situation you find yourself in. When X happens, I will do Y. And if it can be something that's actually physical, even if it's something you're doing under the table, like, patting your leg so you can snap out of it, that's even better. But the more you do that, you create a new neural pathway, because I'm a brain-based strategist. Whenever you do that, you begin to create a new pathway. I think I saw Arcely, I think it was on Instagram or somewhere, talking about neuroplasticity, the ability of the brain to be able to create these new neural pathways. And the more that you use the new behavior, it becomes repetition helps it become a new habit, and you no longer utilize that other pathway that you have been using for years for feeling like you're less than or you shouldn't take up much space, all that stuff. That all can change. That's a mindset shift that you can take. And I suggest that you begin, not you personally, Lexi, anyone listening, you begin with an if-then plan. Very simple, set it up ahead of time. And I don't care if you have a book full of them for every situation that you find yourself in, but it's very, very beneficial. It's worked for many, many years. It's not something new. I didn't come up with it. I think Charles came up with it, actually.
Thank you so much for that. Yeah, that's my first thing that popped up was if I feel like I'm taking up too much space, hold it and feel the discomfort and like hold it, actually expand it wider. Like you said, that's your work, not mine. But Malaika, you came off and then.
Yeah, I was just going to tell you that tall poppy syndrome is what is commonly referred to. And because we're all human on this planet, we're not the only ones that ever feel that way. And tall poppy syndrome it's basically that whenever that one poppy that's standing above the rest in the field, everybody else wants to chop it down, right? And so I encourage you to be the tall poppy. Like that's, and I love that if you Google tall poppy syndrome, there'll be a bunch of pictures of red poppies, and I love that they're red because that is a very see me color. And so if just in terms of visualization, if you need to picture yourself as that beautiful tall poppy in that moment where there's others feeling like you need to cut you down, then I think that's a great visualization because poppies are beautiful. And a tall poppy is even more so because you can see her. Go ahead, put it on me.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much.
I want to add something to that because another thing, those are so great. And also when you were talking, Alexis, about sitting in the discomfort, if you know this is something that automatically happens, and it's kind of piggybacking off of what Sonia said, the preparation, right? That you prepare for it when you go into any spaces or any environments. And if you're, pleasantly surprised that it doesn't happen, great. But if it does happen, you already have the tools and the resources. And also, as it happens, that you embrace it as a gift as opposed to this detrimental negative thing, right? The reason that I say it's a gift, when others shrink, first of all, it's an indicator of their self-esteem. It has nothing to do with you. If you can see that as them acknowledging your brilliance, your amazing qualities, your leadership capabilities, if you can see that as, oh my gosh, these people see me as that poppy that Malaika's talking about, that red poppy, thusly red lips today. It's the tricks that we do with ourselves. I am a severe introvert. So the red lip for me, it's not that the red lipstick gave me courage, but it already sets the tone of me being the thermostat. I create the temperature. These red lips go before me. They're already creating the temperature. They're already setting the environment. So if you can look at it as, and this isn't me telling you what to do, but it's merely one of those tips and tools. I'll be 53 in April. We've learned some things along the way, right? And you have too. Even being a young adult, you have your experiences and your wisdoms, and you pass them on. If you can see it as opposed to, they make me shrink. No, they can't make you do anything. I can choose to walk in my greatness. I can choose to walk in my power without attempting to intimidate people, because some people don't have the right motives, but it doesn't seem that you're that person. I can choose to stand tall, and I am honoring myself by being fully me. I'm not honoring anyone when I shrink. So their understanding, their recognition, what they see in you is what's really in you. So if you can focus on what's in you as opposed to what they're seeing and their responses, you'll overcome that quickly. And walk in your brilliance and still have modesty and still have this level of approachability, which is not a word that I'm going to make a word right now, but being approachable and being embracing and warm. You can be brilliant and warm at the same time. Imagine a diamond, right? You can be that diamond and shine brilliantly and still be beautiful. So focusing on you as opposed to them.
I love that. Oh, I'm getting all of the great wisdom today, and I really appreciate it. It all resonates with me, and I'm sure everybody else as well who feels similar to me as well. And yeah, that definitely resonates with me. I feel like my inner child is like, yes, like take up the space, shine. And when you feel other people's shadows coming out because you're shining, that has nothing to do with you and everything to do with their own work that they have to do. And so shine bright anyway. So I love that. We have one last panelist, correct, for this question. For those who don't know, I am going to refer to her as mom because she's my mom. I said Sherry in the beginning and I literally got the ick. So mom, if you want to come off mute and share what has, kind of, yeah, how have you redefined your identity based off of what society has maybe tried to put you in a box, or even just feeling like you didn't have an identity in the world? Like, I'm just curious how you've defined that for yourself, especially even being like an empty nester, right? Like, there's so many shifts that we're making with identity. So I'm just curious what comes up for you.
Thank you. Yes, and you can call me mom. That's better than Sherry. Yes.
Sorry.
All good. I first of all just love. Listen, women are powerful. Black women are powerful. I just am learning so much from all of these women, and it just makes me proud. And I think when I was listening to everybody and thinking about identity, I still think I'm trying to figure out my identity as, you know, not just as a Black woman, but labeled as I'm a mom, I'm a wife. I'm these things that sort of keep me in these roles, and I'm trying to break free and find out who Sherry is and not how I'm defined by anybody in society. I think, you know, being raised by a very strong Black man who filled up the whole space of the house when he came into our home, you automatically felt very small. My mother was a very quiet, Southern raised woman. She hardly spoke. She was the heartbeat of our family. And I always felt like I wish she would have spoken up to this strong man. Walking around our house, my father was, you know, he king of the house. But that was it. And I always felt so very small. And I think that's why I withdrew and disappeared into writing and find that voice. Identity for me, going back and finding my roots, it's very sad to me that I can only go back so far. In my family line back to the 1800s because of the census, that was all as far as I could go back, not knowing my origin, my history, who were my people. Oh,
look.
I'm sorry. That kind of hit me. That makes me very sad. I see the trauma. I see how my father was a angry Black man, but he never took that out on us. But it wasn't later into life that I heard his experiences, that to be a Black man, to be a man, and to be made to feel like he had to be less than in order to survive in this world. breaks my heart. And now I understand him more. I understand why he held his anger. He was always having to mold himself to a place where he was told he was less than. And I think that what I brought from my father is that one thing that I did do is that I believe that wherever space that I walked into, I belonged. And I think growing up as a child, I never understood it. I didn't feel that I was accepted. It was very subtle, but I didn't understand why I didn't feel accepted. But it wasn't until later when I heard Muhammad Ali. He was on an interview and he was talking about, he asked the questions that I think as a child I didn't know how to verbalize, but he said, why is everything white? Why is Santa Claus white? Why is Jesus white? Why is Snow White white? Well, not black. And anything that was black was considered bad. You know, the black cat was bad luck. If I threaten you, I'm going to blackmail you. Like anything that had to do with blackness was bad and scary. But anything that had to do with whiteness was good and pure and holy. And I think my identity, I couldn't find myself. I couldn't see myself on the TV. I couldn't find me. I couldn't find me. And I think that is something I still struggle with to this day. There's just these subtleties. Now in this environment and time that we live in, it's in your face. And I am angry about it. I'm angry about a lot of things. And I'm so grateful for RC that she has that wisdom to know that this is an important conversation, that this separation of fear because of someone's color, the comfortability that someone has to ask me a question about my hair that you wouldn't ask. It just blows my mind, the subtleties. I have a hard time. This is not my comfort space. I am an introvert like Sonia. I would rather be behind the scenes and not talking. So sometimes it's hard for me to really express myself. But I think that where I'm at in my life is I'm identifying with my convictions of Sherry Baker Taveras. And you're not going to speak to me any certain kind of way if I don't like that. If I'm telling you that what you said to me hurt, whether you understand it or not, I'm going to speak up. And I think that's sort of where I'm at in my life. It took this many years for me to get to this point in my life to speak up for myself, not just as a Black woman, but just as a woman, just as me, as Sherry, and with all of the trauma. And I've healed a lot, but I think I'm always going to be asking and learning and, questioning. And I think the reason that I've created spaces like Lynn, thank you so much for sharing that and saying that you have space for me. I think the reason that I create space for women of all colors is because I know how hard it is for me to speak my truth and my anger that has come explosive because I felt so quieted and not given permission. I'm giving myself permission to speak, to write, and I will write a book called Yellow Ass because I'm gonna write about that. But the strongest people that have been in my life have been my grandmother, and the stories that she shared with me. And it's to me, Black women are powerful, but women overall are powerful. And I want us to understand one another and to respect and honor where we come from. And if you walk in my shoes, you will understand. And that's sort of where I'm at. I'm still figuring it out. I don't think I have got all the answers for myself, but this has helped me a lot, being in this group, because I don't talk about it with others. I haven't talked about it, and I'm grateful for this group. I appreciate everyone who showed up, and I appreciate everybody who shared. Some just powerful women. So that's it. I don't know if I made any sense, but that was
Yes,
it.
you did. Yes, you did. Everything. I was even getting emotional. And I think the biggest thing is, like, when we heal ourselves, we're also healing our ancestors, and we're healing our father, we're healing our mother, we're healing our bloodline. And I know a lot of that healing, a lot of the repressed emotions is a lot of that anger from a lot of the times that we felt like we couldn't speak up, or we did and got met with and sometimes literal death, right? Like actual threatening to your survival. And so thank you so much for sharing that, Mom. And I'm so happy that you're at a place now where you are really stepping into your fully expressed self through writing, through connecting with other women, through, like Lynn said in the chat, I am the changer. I am the one healing my bloodline and breaking generational patterns. And the healing, all of the quietness that grandma had, like you are now unleashing, and I'm unleashing, and Samuel and Brandon Journey, we're all just healing. And when we heal ourselves, we heal our bloodlines. So thank you so much for that. I love you. And thank you to everybody else and the support in the chat. We have around 20 minutes left. So I want to make time for at least one question, but I want to make this rapid fire if we can, so we can leave a little bit of time for Q&A or just open discussion with participants or just takeaways. So my last question, I think it really segues perfectly as we're talking about being fully expressed and owning our identity and knowing that we're fluid and multidimensional. We're not just in this box of, I don't even know if the right question is, how do you find your authentic voice? As a Black woman, or as a woman, as a Black girl growing up, but more so how you own your voice fully, authentically, without guilt or shame, or, maybe it is there, maybe you just don't listen to it. But I'm curious and excited for this last question. How do you fully own your voice? How did you find your authentic voice? And any thoughts? And we'll start with Michelle.
Of course, I love this question. I started with talking about helping women find their voices. So first and foremost, I have an acronym that I kind of go by, and I use this for my own life. As a child, especially a Black child, we hear, now we're going here and you better act right. You better act like you have some sense. You better act like, how many Black women in the room heard that as a child? Don't go in here and act like you've lost your mind. We've all heard that. And that can be disempowering when you think about it, because the concept of your parent telling you to put on an act, and then I, dealing with all my life's traumas, became the master of masking. I was acting for the first 30 years of my life. But it can be disempowering, so I made it a more powerful thing. The acronym is ACT, and it's acknowledge, create, and transform. And there are other words that I kind of use interchangeably with that, like admit and all the things, but confess, admit, confess, and transform. How do you find your voice? First, you have to acknowledge that Either you have never had it, someone took it from you. You have to face the things that have caused you to be silent. You have to face and acknowledge how you feel like you don't have a voice. So first, it's the acknowledgement. It's the admittance. Like, okay, this happened to me. And I remember in that moment, I felt silenced. Okay, so now what can I do to create? But in the creation, interchangeable with confession, confessing to yourself, finding out, who am I? Who do I want to be? Because all the things that I went through, we talked about labels like extensively. There were so many labels that were on me. And I assumed those labels. I assumed those identities because I didn't have a voice. When I decided, of course, as a Christian, I found a lot of my identity through the Bible. That's Michelle's way. That's not everyone's way, but that was the initial, once I wanted to live, because for a very long time I did not want to. Once I actually realized there is value in my life, I said, who do I want to be? Not who people have called me, not the labels that they assigned to me, not the trauma that was assigned to me and forced upon me. Who do I want to be? And I literally started talking to myself. It may sound like insane for some, in the mirror. I started to look at myself in the mirror, my imperfections, all those things that we hate about ourselves. And we say horrible things to ourselves that we would never say to people we love. I started to look in the mirror. For me, I use scripture and all these other things, but I also asked Michelle, who do you want to be in the room when you wake up? And I'm not talking about rooms where there's a stage and there are people. When you wake up, who do you want to bring in the room? What temperature do you want to set? What space do you want to create, not just for yourself, but for others? When people come in your presence, how do you want them to feel? How do you want them to leave? What do you want them to learn? And how do you want to show up as yourself? How will you be the most fulfilled? When I started to ask those questions, I gave myself the freedom to evolve. I will be 53 years old in April. I am launching my Kindle business. I have my LLC. I have my EIN, all the things. I'm launching my website this week. For many, that could seem like this arduous task. And how are you reinventing yourself at 53? You should have done this. And I refuse to should on myself. I don't should on other people, and I don't should on myself. I am who I am, and I give myself permission to evolve constantly. Who I am today is not who I was in the beginning of my healing journey. And that's because I have given myself permission, and I check in with me. I'm not listening to other people. People don't give me permission to do anything. You hear these sayings, oh, I heard you speak and it gave me permission to do XYZ. No one can give you permission to be yourself. You can hear someone's story and it, causes enlightenment. It makes you feel like part of a community. It makes you feel like you're not alone. Yes, that can be true. But the reality is only you, not even God. Only you can give yourself permission to grow and evolve. So that's how I found myself. I gave myself permission to make mistakes, trial and error, start this, do that. I have not only written poetry books, but I've also written my memoir. And I also wrote a self-help book. And giving myself permission to wear all of the labels, all of the titles, all of the things even that make me look maybe not in a good light. It's part of my story. It is part of who I am. I'm no longer drenched in shame. Those things that used to cause shame, I now embrace them because guess what? The very things that held me hostage and had me ashamed were the very things that some of the people in the room needed to hear. They needed to hear that, oh my gosh, you've overcome that. I'm going through that right now. How did you do it? So I create an opportunity. I started writing what I wanted to be and then started writing, okay, how can I get to this point? What do I need? What tools do I need to go from the dream or the vision to reality, to execution? And I wrote those things down. And then one by one, I started checking them off. And I started to resemble the person that I'd only dreamed about. I'm still not fully who I will be, but I'm so much closer to her. I am so much. And I give myself permission every day to transform myself daily. That's the act. Acknowledge, create, transform.
I love it. Thank you so much for that, Michelle. I love how you said nobody can give you permission, because it's something I found myself say a lot. It's like they gave me permission because they did this, so it made me feel safer to do it. But you're right, it causes a sense of enlightenment, which then you just then choose to give yourself the permission you could have gave yourself the whole time. So I absolutely love that. All right, Lynn, I know that you had your hand up, but I know you're not feeling too well. Did you want to answer this question?
Oh, it's okay. I can be very short.
Yeah, no, I want to hear.
I actually was going to skip because I knew you wanted to talk to others. But when I think about what I did, I realized that my voice wasn't stolen. A lot of people say, oh, your voice is stolen. Oh, your voice was stolen. Oh, they took something from you. That wasn't my case. When I really looked at the situation, my voice was muted. And I say muted because it never was stolen. It was at the place where I dealt with situations or the experience, and I, at the time, didn't realize or remember what my voice sounded like. So as I stated before, I used to be in all these different things, and I was thinking about, I was like, I remember when I was in choir, how my teacher would say, you are a first soprano, and my voice is a classically trained voice. I don't have what they would call like a typical Black person's voice. And so soprano 1 was easy for me, but I was like, that's what you want me to do. I found out that I was like an excellent alto, like second alto. I was like, this is where I live, okay? But when I realized that, I was like, see, that's the thing. Your voice was muted. You allowed people to tell you what your voice was, how it would sound, how you would use it, and all those things. So to answer the question again in a nutshell, I realized my voice was muted, and then I was able to like press pause, reset, all the things, press play, and continue with that. So that's how I answered that.
I love that. I love that so much. Like realizing where, yeah, someone else tried to mute you, but taking that back and taking that remote back and being like, nope, play, and restarting with where you're at. So I love it.
I love that. I just want to say, man, I love you. Oh my goodness. This like she's not feeling well. The little tidbits that we're getting here on this call for these 2 hours is just literally the tip of the iceberg. Like I'm just being reminded, our pre-call, every time we get on have a conversation with any of these ladies, it is just eye-opening and phenomenal. So I just celebrate all of you. I wanted to say about the voice. So I am not, even though I am a chief empathy officer, I'm not as woo-woo as that sounds, right? So amongst us, there's a bunch of woo-wooers out here. It's interesting when we were talking about voice, Lynn, and let me know because I'm getting, if you guys can't hear me, okay, because I'm getting little messages. When we talk about voice, I did the human design. So those of you who are familiar with human design, right? And I'm a generator. But one thing, when I got the little map that came back, and it showed the closed throat chakra and the resistance that it had there. I think it's so important when we talk about voice and we talk about trauma and what trauma does to you and the quietness that it instills that may not even be part of who you actually are. I tell a story sometimes of one of the moments that I started to realize what momentology truly was, and I started to realize what my power was. I was working in a government office. I've never been a government employee. I've been a contractor for many, many, many years. And I was often the only, right? But I was the only that had sort of unwritten power. And when I say that is because I wielded a lot of underlying power. Lots of folks quoted me. Lots of folks walked around with this. I was a policy officer. People walked around with the things that I wrote, and they went to higher echelons of office and re-spoke my words. But that wasn't enough. I still felt unaccomplished. I was pregnant with my daughter, and I was in a meeting that I was leading, and this older white man came up to me and told me to get his coffee. Didn't ask who I was, just assumed in these here 2000s, my daughter's 15, it wasn't that long ago, y'all. In these 2000s that I should go, I'm the one out of everybody in this room that should go get his coffee. And I was incensed. I was livid. I was so upset. I walked out of the room, out of the conference room, got in my car. Y'all, I got in my car and drove away. I'm a full whole adult, supposed to be leading a meeting, and I got in my car and I drove away. Tears streaming down my face. I was so mad. Who does he think he is? All the things. And I sat in the park. I didn't go far. I sat in the parking lot crying. And then it occurred to me that he didn't have me crying in the parking lot in my car. I had me crying in my parking lot, in my car. Because it didn't matter what he thought. I knew who I was. And that's kind of like what Michelle was saying about, or Lynn was saying about, is muted. It's not gone. He didn't take anything from me. He made a faulty supposition. And, it is what it is. There's lots of things you can do at any moment when you face uncertainty, when you face something that's not fair, all the things are going to happen. People are going to treat you horribly. And you can either identify with what they think you are, Sonia, what you think is everything. So I got myself together. I sat in that car and I was holding my belly and thinking and talking to my unborn daughter. And I promised her in that moment that no one anywhere would ever make me feel this way again. And that I would do everything in my power to make sure that when she got to this planetary system, she would never let anyone do that either. And I think at 15, and those of you who either have heard me talk about, there's just about everybody, heard me talk about my daughter or know her, she takes no tea for the fever, as my grandmother says. So there's something there. There's something there about owning who you are at every given moment. And that's where momentology came from. Momentology is about who you are, leveraging what you have right now in this moment. So at that moment, pregnant, supposed to be leading the meeting, crying my eyes out, I decided that I was going to drive back to the office, go back upstairs, and conduct the meeting that I was supposed to conduct. And so when I got to the office and I got in the room, because again, all of this happened really quickly. Y'all, you see the movies where stuff happened in like slow. That's what happened. So I felt like I was in my car for about 2 hours. It was probably 15 minutes. It wasn't even that, right? So by the time I got back to the office, nothing had changed. It wasn't the end of the world. Nobody was crying. Nobody was dead. Nobody was bleeding. They carried on. And I walked to the front and I started with the presentation, and the look, the man's face turned beet red. Beet red. He was looking around like, did anybody see me ask her for coffee? That's what I imagined. That's what I imagined he was thinking. Now, it didn't matter if he was embarrassed or not, because it's not about him again. But again, we make all these stories in our head about things that happened to us, or that things we think happened to us. It's a thing that happened, and maybe he thought about it, maybe he didn't. But what did I think about it was the most important thing. And what I got from it is that I would never, ever let anybody make me feel that way. And I can't say that no one has ever irritated me. I can't say that no one has ever offended me. But what I can say is that I own my space and my voice. And I say when I want to say, and I don't say when I don't want to say. And I don't make excuses either way. And that's not something that just happens overnight. It's not easy, but it is simple. I'm true to myself because I know my source. And I know that there's nothing that man can say, do, have, be, that I can't. Black woman, all of the slashes, it doesn't matter. So I will say that for me, the whole point of this evening is to just sit in the possibility of you. No matter what the trauma is, no matter what you look like on the outside, no matter your gender, no matter your sexuality, none of that stuff matters as much as who you are on the inside, and sitting with that, because you have to be okay with it. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. You have to be okay with how you present yourself and show up in the world. So if we have done nothing else this evening, I'm hoping that you know that whatever, I don't care if you're a left-hand paraplegic, queer, bipedal knitter or something. I don't know who knits, but you know what I'm saying. Y'all, you are, whoever you are is how you need to be, period. And the trauma is in denying that.
I love
I love
it.
y'all.
Yes, thank you so much, Malaika. Oh my goodness. I'm not gonna be able to sleep tonight. I'm too excited. Sonia, how would you like to wrap up today?
Well, we are at time. I want to say one of my favorite words, little phrases that I would use was, I'm not available for that. So when he asked you for coffee, I'd look him straight in the eye and say, I'm not available for that. Yeah. The only thing I would like to say is when you decide to use your voice, you decide who you are, what is your identity, who you're going to be. And remember, you can change that every moment of every day if you want to. We're not boxed into anything, right? You have the power. I suggest that we all live what I call the prime life. They lied to us, ladies. Well, for those people that are in their 30s and 40s, that's when they thought we were in our prime. That's a lie. We're in our prime when we decide we're in our prime, and I think we're in your prime if you are raising children when they have left the nest, and you have your time to yourself. I suggest that we live a purposeful life. I call it the prime life, which stands for purposeful, stands for resilient, innovative, mindful, and empowered. So go live your prime life. Be purposeful, be resilient, be innovative, be mindful, and be empowered. And I'll leave it at that.
Yay, thank you so much. I love that. RC, go for it.
Okay. If there is more, by the way, if anyone has any questions or anything before I put in my 2 cents, I suppose, is maybe what I could say. I would welcome anyone to ask any questions or say anything before I kind of add some final thoughts to this. And for any of you who don't know, I know some of you came in a couple minutes after we began. My name is RC. I am the founder and CEO of Survivor School, and I knew that this conversation needed to happen, and I knew that I was not the voice to host this, but I knew that I needed to make space for this. So I do have some final thoughts and a lot of insights and some things that I've taken away from this that I do want to share. But I want to make sure I give everyone here an opportunity to ask questions and make comments before I kind of button things up. So I'm going to check the chat as well to see if there's anything coming in. And Alexis, thank you so much for moderating this and being absolutely on point. Let's see. Cool. Cool. I'm sorry. Just reading through the chat here. It's coming in rapid fire, and I'm getting some direct messages as well. Okay. So if no one has any further questions, I do have a couple of things, and I have been taking notes this entire time. I do plan on sending out recap emails, blog posts. There is so much that is going to come from this. So much has been sparked in my own mind. I don't know if any of you have seen, but I've been in tears for most of this. Happy tears, sad tears, a lot of empathy, a lot of sympathy as well. Empathy, it's my understanding too, and please correct me if I'm wrong in this, but empathy is shared experience, and sympathy is witnessing someone's experience. And I've had a lot of both of those tonight. A couple of takeaways that I think are really important to emphasize here is that for a very long time, I believed that racism was about hate. And then at some point in my life, I realized it wasn't about hate, but then I thought it was about fear. And I thought it was fear of what people didn't understand. We fear what we don't understand. But today, I think that my belief has shifted to racism is actually about assumptions. And those assumptions might bring fear. Those assumptions might cultivate hate. But those assumptions are what creates this divide. And I want to say thank you to every single person here for helping me understand that distinction. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is, and sort of, again, a takeaway for me, and what I can take away from this, what I've learned from this, and what I can apply to Survivor School is on this conversation of empathy. I think that many of us here who have experienced trauma may have felt a lot of the emotions and pains that you have all shared. We're human, and that's sort of the commonality that we all do share, regardless of our race and our age and our experience and our life experiences and the things that make us different. But the commonality that we share is that we are human and that we all have human emotions. But what I'm recognizing the difference is that it's compounded for Black women. It seems that a lot of these pains and a lot of these traumas and a lot of these experiences are, they seem inescapable, and they seem much more present in every area of your lives. They may not be isolated to specific traumas that you may have experienced. And I realized that finding a space to express these struggles and finding a space that feels safe to be seen and to connect with others is oftentimes a chore. And it might take more analysis or fear or more trauma to find those spaces. So that said, Survivor School is intending to be a safe space for women, for all women. I don't want it to be a chore, and I don't want there to be fear in finding that space or coming to this space. And I'm going to rely on every single one of you. Every single one of you is one of our specialists or our experts, and you've been invited to this space because you bring something amazing to our community. You bring something so different to our community. So I'm going to rely on every single one of you to help me make this space everything you need it to be. All right, that's about all I can get out without completely breaking down. But
Thank you,
I
Arthur.
wanted to share that as some big takeaways from this.
Thank you, RC. Yes, a lot of takeaways for sure. And I see a lot of you guys in the chat. That is the word inescapable, right? Which is definitely a perfect word to use for that. And obviously, I'm very grateful to have the opportunity to moderate this and hold this conversation for you guys. I've recently been reconnecting to my ancestry, my, upbringing, inner child. And I don't think up until now, at the age of, I turned 27 next week, where I started to realize like all of the things that you do bring on and to rework and to heal. And as I'm moving into my 30s, and it's just a lot, but it's exciting. And I think it's great to be able to get wisdom from women who have been there. It's also refreshing to see women, no matter their age, just ripe with life and going against the like life ends at a certain age. Like I rebuke that. So everyone's like, yeah, no. So I'm like, phew, because that's not what I was gonna do. Mom, you raise your hand.
Yeah, I know we're ending. I know we're closing out, and we're just a little bit over. RC, I just want to say thank you so much for providing the space. I just wanted to say one thing about voice. I feel that I made a decision to pour my voice that was silenced into my children, into my 4 children, that they would take their voices and live their very best lives and speak very loudly. And I'm very proud of my daughter because she epitomizes that, and I'm so proud of her. And then I also would just like to end with, the divide that we have, and all of us, black, white, whatever color, whatever persuasion, whatever you are, we all come from a trauma. We all have had our experiences. And I think when it comes to the Black experience, it's an acknowledgement of each other's experiences. That if I say to you, this is my experience, don't dismiss it, because there's an experience that you may have had that may be differently lived, but I would want to acknowledge that for you as well. It's acknowledging each other's experiences. And I think that's where we are all seen. Lynn said in the chat, Sherry, I see you. That for me is what I have always wanted my children to know, that they are seen and they are heard. And everybody, no matter your color, no matter your background, everyone wants to be seen and heard and acknowledged, that their experience, whether you understand it or not, that you can acknowledge that. And I think that's all we want. It's just, don't tell me I didn't have that experience. Just listen, and I appreciate everyone who showed up today. I learned so much, and I definitely walk away even more empowered and feel seen and heard. And I'm very proud to be a part of this panel. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you for that. Yes, I totally agree. To be seen is what is that saying? To be seen is to be loved, or to be seen is to be known. I don't know, but to see yourself and then to also acknowledge others in that, I think, is beautiful. So can't wait to read Yellow Ass too. Maria said in the chat, same, we're holding you accountable now because you said it. But thank you so much, guys. If anybody else doesn't have any other questions or last thoughts. Michelle? Yes. Okay. I knew I saw a hand go up.
Okay, so as I said, I'm so excited about completing this poem. It's going to be really good. But I want to leave us with this. And I wrote it from my perspective about me, but I'm making it about we. We are Black women, fully capable women. We can conceal a nation in our bosom with the weight of the world on one hip and the burden of equity on the other. We dream, have visions, and execute goals with every breath. We consume space with every glide and step. We refuse to shrink because of your stereotypes. We embrace resistance while radiating royalty. The truth is, we are resilient, delicate, beautiful, modest, brilliant, confident, ferocious, vivacious, thoughtful, determined, and purposeful. And there is a place birthed in each and every one of us, presented through us. We are Black and we are women. Both are powerful, Both are beautiful, both are capable, and both are valuable. We are Black women.
Yes, I love it. What a beautiful way to wrap up today's session. For everybody who showed up today, thank you so much. You didn't have to, but you chose to. And I think that that is just shows your commitment, and it's an acknowledgement. So appreciate all of you guys. Let's definitely connect after this. And yeah, hopefully do another one of these soon. Good night, everyone. Bye.